the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. The Gospel of the Lord. You, O Christ. I was terrified and desperately trying to figure out any excuse I could come up with to say no. You see, I had only been attending this new church for a matter of months at this point. Every week, the pattern of the liturgy was the same. Alongside the sermon and the scripture reading, there was testimony. Someone from the congregation would be invited to share their story, a story about how God was active in their life. Some of the stories were funny and amusing. Others moved me to tears. But always, every story left me awestruck and inspired. So then, apparently, it was my turn. I opened the email from my pastor. I really don't remember what it said, but it basically ended with the question, would I like to give my testimony? No, thank you. There's no way. I don't have anything worth saying, especially compared to others. Their stories are so powerful and moving. Well, I gave my testimony. Was I still terrified? Oh, goodness, yes. But I knew that there was also power in sharing our stories with one another. As if I had gotten so much out of hearing the stories of others, who's to say that there wouldn't be someone that wouldn't get something out of mine? There is power in personal testimony. Even though it's so much easier to just want to listen to the stories of others all day, as inspiring and moving as they are, as if we have nothing of our own to contribute. So Jesus begins his conversation with the disciples innocently enough. Who do people say the Son of Man is? What are the neighbors saying about me? What have you heard? I don't think Jesus is actually interested in their answers, though. It's really more of a setup to his real question, the question that comes next. But who do you say that I am? Suddenly it gets a lot more personal, a lot more quickly. And then Peter shares his testimony seemingly out of the blue. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. It's not a quote from someone else, no citation needed. It's his own testimony, his experience, his confession of faith. As an English major who wrote countless papers, and now as a pastor who writes nearly weekly sermons, I can tell you that it's incredibly tempting when you're reading a commentary by someone else to just want to quote the brilliance of what they say. as though their words are just so perfect and fitting for the occasion that I couldn't possibly come up with my own. And I do that a lot. But as I've come to learn, and maybe you have as well, more often than not, there are no more perfect words than our own. Our story is uniquely ours to tell, no one else's. And you have no idea who may be listening or needing to hear exactly what you have to say. Now, of course, that means that we have to be vulnerable, to open ourselves up, flaws and all. No one's story is perfect, and none of us has lived a life without mistakes or regrets or embarrassing failures. The same Peter, who is commended by Jesus for his testimony, who is called blessed for his confession of faith, and who is named as the rock on which Jesus will build his church, is the same Peter from a couple Sundays ago of little faith, only 2 chapters before, who nearly drowns when he gets frightened while trying to walk on water. This is the same Peter who needs Jesus to explain a parable to him. And this is the same Peter who, in the reading to come next week, just verses later, this is the same Peter who will rebuke Jesus' foretelling of his death, and who Jesus subsequently calls Satan and a stumbling block. And this is the same Peter who will eventually deny knowing Jesus 3 times on the night of his arrest. All of which is to say, if you haven't been following along, that Peter wasn't perfect. Far from it. But it doesn't make his testimony any less real. True stories include flaws as well. And I think that that's where we often resonate with others' stories the most, or at least I do. Wow, they screwed up like that too? It's relatable, and it gives us permission to get out of the boat in the first place and to try. Or in my case, to step up to the mic in front of the congregation that I had only known for months and share my testimony anyway. So what about this rock? Well, I'm not convinced it's actually Peter the person, even though that's what the name Peter means in Greek, but more so his story. Peter's story and his confession of faith and trust in a Messiah who saves and a God who is living is a foundation, a bedrock for others to stand on and tell their stories. Look to the rock from which you were hewn and to the quarry from which you were dug. The prophet Isaiah declares, look to Abraham and Sarah who bore you, your ancestors in the faith on whose shoulders you stand, who placed their trust in this God who comforts the waste places and makes the desert wilderness blossom into an abundant garden. There is power and salvation in community, dispersed as we are in this moment. Hearing the stories of others, whether it's our biblical ancestors in the faith or our contemporary faith community, the people we surround ourselves with. Hearing their stories enables us to tap into our own stories and gives voice to our own testimony of how God is still working in our lives, flaws and all. The community of faith supports one another as a chosen family, a word that I've heard over and over again to describe this community at St. Philip. Now more than ever, we give thanks for the ways that God draws us together around word and sacraments, through lunch gatherings outside and Zoom small groups online, learning from one another as one body with many members, hearing how God is still acting in and through us, even when things feel scary or uncertain, or the world seems to be crumbling around us. Look to the rock who gives us birth, the strong foundation of our faith, the Messiah, the Son of the living God, Christ, who is with us always to the end of the age.